Okay, I find um War of the Windsors, a century of unconstitutional monarchy, and this book came out 25 years ago, I think. Um, yeah, 2002. So was that 24 years ago? Yeah. Um, it's like super detailed. Lynn Picknett, she's an excellent writer, so it's like in the best British English. So it's very enjoyable read, but it's also very meticulous and sort of like legalistic because obviously she has to make sure she's done her research so she doesn't get sued or whatever. And gets into the German connections with the royal family. So it's interesting because you're getting into aristocracy across Europe and the connection to the Russian royal family and um, the British royal family, like being very um, supportive of fascism, and then that getting suppressed. Um, and and then it ends with how Queen Elizabeth was considered cold-hearted, not just to Princess Diana, but when she was presented with a girl who had some kind of disability, presented a flower to her, and she didn't have any sort of physical connection to the girl. She just sort of smiled and turned away, and she didn't like, obviously she didn't want to touch the girl, and it's just kind of like she was just seen as cold-hearted for that. That was how the book ended, and a lot of it's like how they, avoid taxes and stuff, and how the private secretary really sort of controls the monarchy. Um, and just like the intrigue between the monarchy and the parliament, and how in in the UK the people are still subjects of the monarchy and they're not technically citizens, even though there's, suppose they kind of pretend to be citizens. Um, and so then I went right into this book, the Sleep Room, about a British psychiatrist, the sadistic psychiatrist, and the women who survived him, Jon Stock. And this is about William Sargent. And his mentor or his protege was Ewan Cameron, who was close friends with William Sargent and who was part of MKUltra. And the book doesn't prove that William Sargent was technically part of MKUltra, but he like inspired MKUltra and consulted with the MKUltra scientists. So it's pretty much like all the evidence suggests he was part of MKUltra. And the idea being that you can control women's minds. And the I just finished the first chapter, and she presents an interesting story because she wanted to become a ballerina. So then, and she found out she got rejected for being considered too big, and so then she became anorexic and was determined to starve herself until finally she was told that she was gonna not survive. And so then it was her whole like ideology was reverse psychology and just being really stubborn. And so because they told her she's going to die, then she started eating again. And but then she still wanted to be a ballerina, so then she went back into anorexia. And then she got submitted to the sleep room, which was torture. And they basically, it's a room full of zombies where they can't remember that they were even put in the sleep room because they're so drugged up, and they're given torturous electroshock therapy, and it causes their hair to fall out and their burning sensations. And they try to scream out and they can't everything is um the doctor then presents the victims to the rest of the medical students, and it's like, look what a good job I'm doing. And one of the patients was a woman who wanted to marry. If she fell in love with a guy in the lower classes, and so her parents sent her off to William Sargent to try to mind control her to not be in love anymore with this guy. And then when she got presented to the medical student, she's like, "Yeah, I'm still in love with him, and I'm gonna marry him when I get out of here." And she just was full of righteous anger. And he's like back to the sleep room, with her, and so it was very much like against. There was no like voluntary, nothing it was totally involuntary and really scary stuff. And then he like sexually assaulted the young females, and so he was like the first lady who had anorexia. She just says, yeah, he looked like he had deep crevices in his face, and he's just like really cold and yeah, essentially like psychotic, and everybody worshipped him and he wouldn't look people in the eyes, and he would just like bark out orders. And um so he was like the psychiatrist's god figure. And I had read his book. I first discovered William Sargent about his book about non-Western shamanism, and he went around the world studying non-Western shamanism, but he never really got to the deep level of it. Like he didn't, he just figured this is how he got the idea where initiation was a way to like um, reshape somebody's personality through a kind of deep what they call, parasympathetic rebound. So you have a deep stress incident, very strong sympathetic nervous system shock, and that's exactly what the electroshock treatment is. And then it's supposed to cause a parasympathetic rebound where you go into a deep unconscious state of trance to then like wipe your memory clean. And yeah, so of course he's, it completely misses the point of like what shamanism is really about, which is this like quantum foundation of reality. And I actually just emailed Professor Jim Akali, who just gave a talk about the asymmetry of the brain and the body, because they keep studying these split brain experiments where they gave people I can't remember what you call it, but they cut their corpus callosum to separate the brain and to stop seizures. And then they could study like the left brain lies to the right brain, but only the right brain can figure stuff out. And they've studied this with other animals too, so they realized that this bias of like right hand bias and left brain bias it's tied to the feeding habits of amphibians, of toads even. And so it's a really ancient um, connection between like your locomotion to eat and your thinking process being left brain, and that connects with right hand dominance with tool use for humans. And but then you get like psychiatrist Ian McGilchrist. His big emphasis is that right brain dominance is actually preferable to left brain dominance, because essentially it goes back to the parasympathetic nervous system, because your left side vagus nerve does not connect to the right side of the brain, but your right side vagus nerve does connect to the left side of the brain. And that was something I discovered in my research, but it's something have also experienced in meditation. You can actually hear the Jing energy like clearing out blockages in your brain, and your skull makes like cracking noises, and it clears from the right side over to the left side. And then when that happens, you clear out mental blockages. It's a really fascinating process. And of course I struggle with purification for food. I have to constantly use essential oils, and I overuse my energy, so my energy is always going up the front of my body when it's supposed to go down the front of your body for in meditation. Anyway, so it's just a very fascinating. Like my claim is like, well, the royal family kind of is psychotic. Like if you look at their like this extreme control